Okay, hey everybody, Turf MD here. We're going to talk a little bit about irrigation, continue our talk about basic fundamentals. So what we're looking at is a hole at the Rim Golf Club at Chaparral Pines. This is where I worked for a few years from 2006 through 2009. The Rim Golf Club is a private country club, just had a handful of members, ultra low play, ultra high budget, big crew. Definitely not the kind of place that you would expect to look like this. So this was my second full summer. And at the beginning of this year, we did a full insect management program. We had a pretty comprehensive disease management program. So what I was looking at here, I was pretty sure it wasn't any insects, it wasn't diseases. I did a lot of digging around in the soil with a cup cutter, looking for larvae and any adults that were ready to emerge, and I found basically zero insect activity. We had a really good comprehensive disease management program this year, so we're not looking at like some sort of crazy widespread disease. Now, I had never seen this before. Most of my experience up to this point had been in the Northeast or in Florida, where it rains all the time, so you don't have to rely on your irrigation system, and stuff never really looks like this in terms of drought. And I mean, maybe a golf course that's unirrigated will look like this every now and then in the Northeast, but for the most part, if you go 2 weeks without rain in the Northeast, people are running around screaming that we're in a drought. So it took me a couple of weeks to identify what the problem was here, what I was looking at, because I just didn't know. So after about 2 weeks, I realized that there was a water distribution problem. And what was going on specifically were the irrigation heads were not balanced. We had some irrigation heads that were putting out, let's say in terms of minutes, let's talk about minutes. Let's say some irrigation heads ran for 20 minutes, some irrigation heads would run for 12 minutes, some irrigation heads would run for 5 minutes, and it didn't make any rhyme or reason whether it was, so for example, it didn't matter whether it was a part circle or a full circle. Like the full circles weren't running 20 minutes and then the part circles running 10 minutes. That would make sense. It was like some full circles were running 5 minutes, some full circles were running 20 minutes, some full circles were running 10 minutes. And the same thing with the outer perimeter rough heads that were all 180s. They were at all sorts of wacky run times. So it took me a couple weeks to figure out what the problem was, the irrigation distribution, and then it took me a couple more weeks to figure out what the solution was. So I took this picture. If you look at the date, I took this picture on June 26th, 2008. And this is one of our worst holes. I took a picture because I had an idea of how I wanted to fix the problem. I wasn't sure it would work because it was just a crazy hypothesis. I'd never come across anything like this. And so I took this hole and I figured if I'm going to implement my solution on this hole, and this because this is like basically one of the worst holes. If it works on this hole, it's going to work on all the rest. So I went to the irrigation computer, did a bunch of work, and here's what I wound up with. So you're looking at the same hole from a slightly different angle, but it's the same hole. And it's only 9 days later. So what I did is I went to the irrigation computer and I balanced everything out. The system was completely unbalanced. So in terms of everything that was set up in the irrigation computer, which was a Rainbird irrigation system, by the way, everything was set up in the computer to run off of evapotranspiration and a percentage of that. So some of the heads along the perimeter, along the outskirts of the golf course, were set at anywhere from 65% to 225%. The same thing for the heads in the fairways. They were set anywhere from like 50% to like 175%. There was no rhyme or reason. Everything was just a massive mix of hodgepodge of ET. It was all random, which I later on figured out why. But So what I did is I basically took an average percentage of all the fairway heads, all the rough heads, divided by 2, and set every single head at that percentage. The cool thing about that was we were actually wound up using, well, you see the results, but we wound up using way less water over time, because just adding up all the rough heads, the fairway heads, the percentages, and then dividing by 2 wound up actually being too much water. So I was able to start to dial the system in once I learned how to use the system properly, this is one of the results that you're looking at. Once I sort of figured out how to use the system, everything got dialed in. Every hole looked like this. Everything went from being horrible and embarrassing to being in great shape. And the cool thing about this too is it affects everybody. So when I got here, we had members that were incredibly upset. They were just not happy people. And the folks that really felt the brunt of that were in the pro shop. Boy, those guys take it on the chin. The people in the restaurant, ooh, the food is always horrible when the golf course is in bad shape. It doesn't matter how good the chef is. It doesn't matter how skilled he is. Which is a comment I got at Wingfoot too. When I was there during my internship, the chef told me that whatever we were doing on the golf course is working out well, because all of a sudden his food tasted better. Now that was a direct reflection on Mr. Latch, on his skill. I was just a grunt at that point, just trying to do my job as best as I could. But here we see just a dramatic before and after, and all this was a combination of insect management, disease management, and irrigation distribution. And what you wind up with is a golf course that is like dead and horrible and disgusting and nasty, to a place where members can be proud to be members. Here we're looking at the driving range. This is the back of the driving range looking towards the clubhouse. You can see in the distance the green just before the clubhouse is the driving range tees, and over slightly in that far left corner is our practice area with practice greens, practice chipping green, practice approach, etc. This I've never seen before either, before getting to Arizona. What they were doing before I got there was they were turning off the irrigation to the range May 1st in anticipation of basically being out of water by sometime in July. So what they would do is turn off the driving range to save water. The only problem is, when this golf course was built in the late 90s, they were early 2000s. I don't remember exactly when it was built. I think it was late 90s. They were trying to sell real estate, and when folks showed up to buy real estate, they'd come into the facility and be knocked off their socks by how beautiful the place was. The main entranceway, the whole driveway to the parking lot area, the clubhouse, the pro shop, the restaurant, everything was unbelievable until you get out back and look at the driving range, and people would say, I don't know how that's going to do in terms of our property value. So let's move on to the next club that has a green driving range. So it's interesting how lack of proper water distribution led to the golf course using way too much water, and this is a result. You have to dial back the water at the driving range. Not only does it look horrible for members, it's embarrassing if you want to bring some guests, but who's going to buy property at this place, right? It's not like they were selling like hotcakes, and this is one of the most beautiful places I've ever seen in the country, where they shouldn't have a square foot left to sell there, because the place is just amazing. But here's what this is what happens when guys don't have proper fundamentals: no insect management, no disease management, and they squander millions and millions of gallons of water through poor distribution. Okay, this is the 6th hole at the Rim Golf Club. What we're looking at is on the far side of the hole around the rock is some nasty looking rough and a scrappy looking fairway. This is actually probably about a month after we started to really try and regrow in everything, so 6 weeks. So this is actually looking way better than it was like a month or 6 weeks previous to this. But I took this picture because it was one of the worst spots on the golf course. I was just trying to figure out what the heck was going on. You could see along how the right-hand side of the rock, the turf was filling in pretty well. The left-hand side of the rock in front of it, it was still bare and kind of funky. And you could actually see right here, really a super green spot. So that's an irrigation head right there. I was trying to figure out what the heck was going on. And this has to do with the distribution. So like I've mentioned, it was uneven distribution. The irrigation heads were set at ETs that ranged from 50% to 225%. So there was a massively uneven distribution of water. That's one of the issues that we're looking at here. Another one of the issues is this is one of the hot spots that we get hit early on in the season with insect damage that nobody knew was taking place. Mostly cutworm damage earlier in the year. So this is one of the bad spots that unfortunately I don't have an after picture of this area, but it looked a million times better than this. Okay, so even if you have a really good insect program, there are these little spots, little bits and pieces here and there around the property that you might miss. So you really need to be like 100% thorough, just super thorough. Here I am thinking about like tees, greens, college fairways, approaches, rough, and I missed this little area around the 18th green where the carts park along the cart path. So what we're looking at here is some insects in the white grub complex, some grub-a-dub-dubs. I'm sure you've seen those before. Here's that area by the 18th green, just horrible. That's where carts park the cars and folks walk over to the green. It's just a horrible walk-on, walk-off area. And a lot of guys would say, oh yeah, it's just a high traffic area, but really we did so few rounds. It's certainly not because of the golf traffic. If anything, the grounds crew is creating way more traffic patterns and wear issues than golfers. What we're looking at here is basically some insect damage, right? So insect damage in combination with a lack of irrigation. We actually needed to put in, we noticed that it wasn't receiving sufficient irrigation, so we put in a couple pop-ups. So you have some insect damage, a little bit of you basically needed a third head for irrigation. So we put in some pop-ups along there, and now I have, this one I do have an after for. And here's that same area, just a different angle. You can see the irrigation heads, a couple pop-ups along the cart path. We basically just resoldered it, and that was that. Next year, this is actually the following year. We did some pretty, we made sure that we got this area during our insect sprays, and this stayed really solid and healthy all year long. It was just awesome. Members are really happy. And just to wrap it up, this is the 9th hole at the Rim Golf Club. This is the culmination of all the hard work and effort that I put in, all the problem solving, and just to show you like how bad this hole used to be. 2 years previous to this, I played with a foursome of guys, and I had to play because my superintendent was embarrassed to play, and I don't blame him. The guys asked, we got up on this tee, and they asked me where to hit the ball. Nobody knew where to hit it. You couldn't see the fairway because it was just terrible. So what you can't see in this picture is just to the right is a big lake. And so I said, what you want to do is you want to hit the ball between the fairway bunker on the left, the one that we're looking at on the left-hand side of the picture, and that lake on the right. So between the bunker and the lake. And the fairway's got to be 40 yards wide. So it was just, they just didn't know where to hit it because you couldn't, there was just no turf out there. So this is the culmination of all that hard work, effort, problem solving, scratching my head, and sort of getting everything dialed in. Place was, it looked like a top 100. So looking at this picture reminds me of when I got there to the Rim Golf Club. The director of agronomy that was working there at the time was absolutely despised by a lot of the members, unfortunately. He was a super, super duper nice guy, a really smart guy. He just didn't quite understand what he was doing with the turf. And I think it was in a little over his head. But once we got the golf course into this shape, it went from being, Joe, I'm embarrassed to bring my friends to the golf course. I used to bring, and you know what, I've heard this at a lot of the other golf courses that I worked at too. The golf courses were in bad shape, so members are embarrassed to bring their friends. They just tell their buddies, you know what, stay home because it's not worth it, guys. Place is in horrible shape. We're not going to have any fun. I'm going to be embarrassed. I'm going to be angry. I'm going to be upset. Paying a lot of money to be a member at this place, and it's certainly not living up to my expectations. What happens when you get the place like in really good shape like it is in this picture, and it was just getting better, the members all of a sudden, they come back to the club, they start to play a lot of rounds, they start to bring in their guests, and then what happens, like especially like but one of the things that happened at Due Process, when we whipped that place into shape, the members started playing a lot more rounds, but then they started bringing their guests. Same thing happened at the Rim. They would bring their guests, and the places were in such good shape that you had really, really proud members walking around, happy to be at their club, taking advantage of it, bringing their friends up, having a whole bunch of fun, going into the clubhouse, having some wine, having some dinner, and just having a whole. It changes the character of the club, the whole feel, the whole everything of the club changes when it goes from being in bad shape to being in good shape. Even the like I mentioned earlier, the feeling that the folks in the clubhouse, they're taking it on the chin when the place is in bad shape. The guys in the restaurant are taking it on the chin. The chef is getting yelled at. It's a nightmare. When the place is in good shape, all of a sudden, even the financials are better. People are going into the pro shop and spending money. You actually have people at the golf course now instead of members going to their other golf courses because they're in good shape. You've got members coming back in the pro shop, the restaurant. You've got them bringing guest rounds, and with those guests come money into the club. It's not like when you put the place into shape, it's a cash infusion, and the whole environment and character of the club changes for the better. That's what a golf club should be all about.